Welcome to Philanthropy in Action, where we engage philanthropists, activists, students, and the community in discussions on how we use our time, talent, and treasure to make the world a better place. I am Maxim Thorne, and I teach Philanthropy in Action at Yale University. Today's guest is Jesse Fink, a founding partner and a member of the investment committee of Mission Point Capital Partners. Jesse, thank you for coming.
Maxim, thank you for having me.
We also have our wonderful Yale University students as part of our conversation, and I welcome them to the show. Beginning with Michael, please introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Michael Schulzen, and I'm a senior religious studies major from Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Hi, my name is Jasmine Lau. I'm from Hong Kong, and I'm a senior economics major.
Hi, my name is Stephen Banks. I'm a senior computer science major from Detroit, Michigan.
Hi, I'm Sunny Tillett. I'm a senior in economics and originally from Zurich, Switzerland.
Hi, I'm McLean Ritzel. I'm an art history major from Larkspur, Colorado.
Thank you. Jesse received the Clean Tech Venture Network's Leader of the Year Award in 2007. This award is presented to an organization or individual who has shown exceptional leadership in adding credibility or resources to the clean tech industry field. He and his wife, Betsy, manage the Betsy and Jesse Fink Foundation, which focuses on catalytic environment and educational grant-making. They serve on a number of nonprofit and startup company boards. Betsy and Jesse have established and run Millstone Farm, which is dedicated to producing organic produce and selling it to local markets and restaurants. Millstone serves as a model for land use and to promote sustainable agriculture in their community. Jesse, it's so exciting to have you participate with us today. The first question I'd like to ask is, how did you get involved in becoming a philanthropist?
Well, let me first start by saying thank you for having me. It really is it's a pleasure to be here and an opportunity, and I look forward to the conversation. So, thank you. I would say that I began. I didn't really know what philanthropy was until I actually had access to some dollars to give away, and that was after the public offering of Priceline. And when that happened, Betsy and I were fortunate enough to have some wealth, and we realized that we wanted to give back. And so we started studying philanthropy and started studying great families and what they were doing. And that was back in about 2000.
Mm-hmm. And you and Betsy, and it was so wonderful to meet your lovely wife, Betsy, who is also here with us in our studio. And so thank you, Betsy, for being here. When you came into wealth, did that pose a challenge in terms of what you were going to do with it, in discussing this with Betsy and your family? And how old were your kids at that time?
Well, those are such great questions. I believe our kids were probably 8 and 10, roughly, at that time. And it posed a lot of questions. When you work for a private company and the company goes public, an IPO, going public means lots of things become public. And so we were part of that wave, the first wave of internet companies. And so it was very overwhelming to us to figure out. We knew that we wanted to give back to the world. We knew we wanted to focus on environmental issues because we met in forestry college as undergrads and always had a passion for the environment. And so we knew that that's what our focus was going to be. But we had no idea what it meant to give money away. I think prior to the year 2000 or 2001, our largest charitable gift might have been $250. And all of a sudden we were propelled into a new world and didn't really have a lot of chance. No one told us what to expect. We weren't trained for that. And you realize how many new friends you can establish when they know that there's something that you can make donations to their favorite causes. So it was overwhelming. I think we knew a course that we wanted to make. We experimented quite a bit, which I hope we have a chance to talk about because we've learned a lot over these 10 or 11 years.
Now, you said something that I find fascinating, which is that you looked at other philanthropists and who had a history of giving. But your particular experience, which was having been part of a startup, a very successful one, Priceline, you brought a whole new set of skills and talents that really wasn't part of the conversation, I would guess, among the people you were looking at, or was it?
No, absolutely right. We were fortunate, very fortunate, to be part of this first wave of wealth creation around the turn of the century. And when we went and studied other families, there are families like the Rockefeller family, in which we spent a lot of time meeting family members of the Rockefellers and actually having advisors who had worked with the Rockefeller family. So we learned a lot from great families and also learned a lot from families that perhaps were not as successful in their philanthropy and also in their families. And I think your first question is very important because with families and family philanthropy, there needs to be a connection between the two. And we've come across many people where that isn't the case, where they're excellent in philanthropy but not necessarily paying attention to their family. And
you have 2 children.
2 children.
What
yes.
are their ages?
Our son Drew is 22 and our daughter Carly is 20.
Just a couple other sort of demographic questions.
Sure.
Where did you go to school as a child?
I grew up on Long Island and went to elementary school and high school in Valley Stream, New York.
And what kind of schools were they?
They were basic Long Island public schools.
Public schools.
Yeah.
And Betsy?
Betsy grew up in Ithaca, New York and graduated from Ithaca High School.
Uh-huh. And did you ever go to religious schools?
Yeah. I did. There was a White Castle near where our temple was, and so we probably visited the White Castle as much as we visited the temple. And I think Betsy had a similar experience in her religion.
Well, because one of the fascinating things that we observe is any contact with early religious institutions seems to affect people's giving. Do you think that that's a connection, or is it not in your case?
No, I don't think so. I think for both of us, and we really are a team, and you'll hear me mostly talk about we and us, and if I talk about I, it's probably a mistake. But both of us did not have a lot of religious training, but we grew up with families that were strong families, and I think with a sense of that there was a bigger world out there that we needed to participate in and to give back. And so it was very natural for us when we realized that we had an opportunity to do wonderful things in the world to figure out how we would make that happen.
And now we go to our religious studies major, Michael.
I feel like I should ask a religion question, but maybe this can transition that direction. I sort of, as a young environmentalist, I think came of age at a time when there was a sense of the death of environmentalism. That as an ideological movement, environmentalism was breaking down or was showing itself to not be working. I'm curious whether you see sort of the capitalist side of what you do, the investing, as a continuation of environmentalism, or are these separate things? Is one more effective than the other?
I think you have to do it all. And I was up here at Yale when the 2 gentlemen who presented the essay of Death of Environmentalism first came out. And they were brilliant, and it was controversial in what they did. The reason why we make investments, environmental investments, is we believe that it is an important component of solving the problems, that the environmental problems that we are facing are so large, they can't be solved entirely with traditional grant making and philanthropy. And so we believe that making investments in clean energy and sustainable agriculture and other things outside of our expertise are an important mix and complement traditional grant making. I'm not sure I answered. Did I answer?
Yeah. I guess where do you think there was the place for that type of, or where's the place when where the investment model is less effective or more effective than philanthropy?
I think that you need both.
Right.
And basic philanthropy which is, to me, traditional philanthropy is grant making, where foundations like ours are making a grant to nonprofits. Here it is. It's a grant. It is an investment. We're making an investment in an organization, but we are not getting a financial return. We are only hoping that there is an impact return, a mission return of what's going on. There are many instances where that's not enough, and many of the organizations that we work with in the environmental world realized probably about 10 years ago that grant making isn't enough. An example is the Nature Conservancy, one of the largest environmental organizations and a great organization that we support. They have a very large budget that comes from philanthropy, but to save the land that they need to save for biodiversity all around the world is far greater. The dollars needed are far greater than they're going to get from fundraising. So they need to find other pools of capital. They need to find folks who will invest as opposed to, or in addition to just donate. Or they'll find individuals who own land who will treat their land responsibly. So this new world that we're living in that today is called impact investing, which is where I spend a lot of time, is really the intersection of finding out where there's traditional grant making, where in between that and where there's purely for-profit investing that has no social or environmental return. Where we are is in the middle, and there's a really need for all of that to happen.
Do you find yourself more engaged, and Betsy, more engaged in monitoring your grant-making functions and the recipients of those grants, or your investment functions, the recipient of those grants, or your private investments and whoever you're investing in?
Right. Well, luckily we have a wonderful team of professionals in all of those pieces, and Joan Briggs is sitting there next to Betsy and really is at the core of, on the philanthropic side, on the grant-making side, and on the investment side, we have a team of folks internally and externally. I would say that I probably should be spending more of my time on our personal portfolio, but I realize there isn't that much that I can do. We've invested with very qualified people, and we monitor that. So I spend most of my time on the philanthropic grant-making and the philanthropic investments, which we are calling impact investments. And of that time, it's more on the, what I'll call the origination and due diligence side, which is figuring out what are the problems that we're trying to solve and who are the right organizations that we want to work through. I'm more interested in that. Once we do that and do that work and we make an investment or make a grant, I personally am a little less interested in the monitoring and the follow-up, but that's just, that's who I am.
And now we go to our economics major, Jasmine.
Yeah. I have a related question with impact investing and also clean technology, which is something you're very interested in. I know technology is something that gets people very excited, but at the same time, sometimes it comes with risks and problems of its own. And I was curious to see, like, for example, what do you think about, how to approach technology in the context of its implementation? It usually comes with, it needs to be effective. It also comes with policy and like behavioral changes. Right. And how does impact investing plays into those?
Well, I should just applaud you all on these great questions. Let me put impact of investing aside for a second and just focus on technology and how technology affects in the sector, in the clean energy. First of all, the main thing that we focus on is the environment, and within the environment, a lot of our focus has been on climate change. And Betsy and I share everything, and then when we do our own things, Betsy's more focused on sustainable agriculture and really at the community level. And for the last 8 years, I've been very focused on global climate change. And our son, Drew, who's 22, and his friends have heard this conversation often, because as we get groups of kids together, we have a conversation about how technology might solve some of these environmental issues. Technology isn't going to solve global climate change. It is not. Technology can hopefully slow down some of the future issues that are going to happen by burning fossil fuels. But it's not, unless we come up with some really amazing geoengineering, we're not going to reverse the damage that has occurred from the way we have been using energy. That's my opinion. I think that most people would, in the scientific world, agree with that. Technology is very important. Consumer behavior is really, really important. And if you bring it down to a specific level of something like smart meters, which is a great technology, but if people aren't going to change their behavior and how they use a smart meter, you could put a smart meter in everybody's house and they can put that smart meter at 85 degrees and not make it, it'll be a smart meter doing the wrong things. So you have to look at all of that, and through our investment side and through our philanthropy side, we look at technology, we look at business models and business model innovation, we look at consumer acceptance to the various different technologies, and all of that leads to policy. And policy is an incredible part of everything that's going on, and in the energy sector, policy is key. And when we first started doing all of this on the philanthropy side and on the investment side, we were not as concerned about policy, and we realized that we actually need to be. And so over the years, we have become more and more engaged on the policy side. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
How do you, because I know you and Betsy have a little bit of difference between policy and politics.
Yes.
How do you and she determine the distinction between those areas?
Right. Well, maybe I should walk into why we even got into policy and then how we even got slightly into politics. It really wasn't by choice. We started off by saying we want to work on environmental issues. And as we started studying environmental issues, we realized that policy was such a key part of it, whether it's land conservation or energy use or agriculture or food. Policy is what drives it all. And then as you start becoming a student of policy, you realize that there's politics that's really behind the policy. That's how policy gets written and gets changed, by the politics. And so we sort of morphed, perhaps me more so than Betsy, morphed into the politics side, said, look, if we really want to make a difference, we probably need to figure out the politics. And so for a couple of years, we were fairly engaged in the politics, thinking that it would really make a difference. We are less engaged at this point in time because, yes, it does make a difference, but we've realized that that's not an area that we want to spend that much time on. You have to really dedicate yourself to the politics side, and that's not who we are. I think we are more want to get our hands dirty, Betsy literally in the ground, and me in working with companies or with small organizations. And we do support policy and organizations, large environmental organizations that are pushing the policy. Of course, it's key, but I think we have backed off a little bit from the last couple of years.
Stephen?
Hi. So when a traditional capitalist plans to invest in an opportunity or considers investing in an opportunity, he or she may predict a range of possible outcomes and assign a probability to each of those outcomes. To what extent do you do the same thing when looking to invest in impact invest in a company or make a grant to a nonprofit, and how feasible is doing such a thing?
Well, I think that I don't want to know if I would use the word easier, but it's being a traditional investor, as you would use the word, you're being measured by a financial return. And it's fairly easy to measure the financial return. If you're investing in a company, what is the profitability of the company? If the if you invest at a certain level and then you exit at a certain level, what was your return on capital? That's been done for thousands of years. Impact investing is new because people used to make grants and then they would make investments, and it's only been recently that we put it together. And it's complicated because you can look at the financial return, but that's not why you're making an investment. You're making an investment because of the impact as well. And I would say that we probably do the same due diligence and rigor on a pure financial investment that we do on an impact investment from the financial side, because it needs to work financially. You have to make a set of assumptions. and you hope that you're going to be within that range of assumptions from a financial return. On the impact side, again, this is kind of a new area, and there's all these different forms of measurement. I would say on that part, we are less measurement focused. So that we look when we're making investments, and again, this is really coming from our foundation that's making impact investments, and I need to differentiate that from Mission Point, which is a firm that is focused on financial returns but making investments in a world of clean energy. In our foundation, we are making investments and we are looking at a financial return, but we also are looking to make an impact. The impact that we like to make is really being a catalyst. So the way we would measure the impact would be if we made an investment, did other people make an investment afterwards? Did we actually test out a innovative business model? Was there a gap in the investment infrastructure of some sort that we plugged the gap with our small investment, and as a result of that, we proved out a model, and other people came behind us and made a similar investment? That's the way we measure it. If we were successful, other people are coming into the market, larger dollars are coming into the market, and eventually the risks that might have been associated with the investment we made will have gone down because everybody will have proved out the risks. And once the risks go down, there's a lot of capital that can come into the market. People want to come in. They have a different risk profile than a small family foundation.
Winston Churchill, see if this applies to you in this, what you're doing.
Sure.
Has a famous saying that I quote in a different context, which is about my life, which is success is going from failure to failure, but with enthusiasm. Does that apply in this space?
That's a great quote. You have to have enthusiasm. You know, you have to, as an entrepreneur, which is what I've been most of my life, you're running on enthusiasm. You know, you need to stand up in front of a group of people and tell them that the company is really going to be fantastic, and then you go home at night and you cry and you hope that it's really going to be. So you have to, you know, and I think by nature we both are enthusiastic people. And you need to have failures. If you haven't failed, then you haven't learned. Or maybe that's not true. If you failed, it doesn't necessarily mean you learned. If you know, and we fail often. But hopefully, when we fail, the next failure is not the same way. And we have learned from the first failure. And go, oh yeah. And we actually even have code names. You know, if we did something and it failed, the next time something comes up, we'll say amongst the three of us or amongst the investment team, oh yeah, that's like a blah blah blah. Mm-hmm. And we go, okay, we'll stay away from that. So you need to fail. I think failure and risk are really important, and that's the way that things grow. If not, we're just all going to be in a fairly steady state.
Do you think that particular way of thinking about failure comes from your entrepreneurial background, and is that different than people who've been engaged in a different kind of philanthropy, or came at philanthropy from an inheritor perspective?
Yes. It's very different because our wealth was created by taking personal risks and career risks and acting a certain way for 15 or 20 years in our professional career. And we had a lot of luck and success and fate, and it worked. And so that model worked for us, and so we're actually using that same model in our philanthropy. If it's and we could do that because it is, you know, it's the Betsy and Jesse Fink Foundation, and we are, you know, we can make those decisions. We abide by all the rules and guidelines that need to happen, but there's not a lot of bureaucracy. In fact, whenever we feel like there's some bureaucracy creeping into our small little foundation, it makes us nervous, and we need to figure out how to do it. We do have good governance, and so I think we have great reports and great accountability, but we like to keep it small. Other foundations that are second generation or third generation, that the founders of that, the creators of the wealth are not there, are in a very different situation. In that case, they have a different responsibility to be more of the stewards of that wealth and make sure that they're following whatever was written down as the guidelines for the philanthropy on how they're going to distribute that. For us, we wrote things down, but we can change it. We can change it. Every year we look at and say, what are the issues, the sub-issues that we want to focus on this year? Okay, how are we going to do that? It just, we are able to run our organization a lot more fluidly and entrepreneur because that's who we are at this stage. 20 years from now, our foundation, if we haven't given it all away, will be in a different situation.
One of our guests who made a lot of wealth from creating the trio and the Palm Pilot, Donna Dubinsky,
Sure.
makes the argument that that is why she is engaged right now. She's alive and she's vibrant in being engaged in philanthropy and those decisions. And addressing the question of does she do it all now and spend it all now
Right.
while she is here, or does she pass it on for some future generation or her children? Are you grappling with that? Because clearly there's a benefit for you and Betsy being engaged right now and
Right.
being able to course correct and alter. And it's a different when other people will be stewarding this, if in fact you choose for other people to steward this at some point in the future. How have you resolved that yourself?
We talk about it quite often, and I would say if we had to make a decision now, we would say that we want to do as much as we can do while we're alive and we're engaged. And that for us, we don't need to leave a legacy of a foundation that our family or other professional people are administering on our behalf. If it turns out that our children have an interest in getting engaged in that, then that would be wonderful. At that point in time, I would suggest that it should be what their passions are and not necessarily trying to live out our passions. So for now, our feeling is we're here. It gives us great pleasure to be working with organizations, small nonprofit organizations, large nonprofit organizations, and to give as much as we can of our time and of our finances to make it happen. It's a maturing process for us, and if I see you in a couple of years, we may be thinking differently, but at the snapshot of today, I think this is how I'd say it.
Sunny?
So I'm wondering, we've touched multiple times on the fact that you've been an entrepreneur, and that's really actually what still defines you. And I'm wondering, working with nonprofits, which maybe don't have, especially web entrepreneurship, where you sort of go from ideation to rapid prototyping to the alpha version, beta version, and you just try to get through that pipeline really quickly. And I think that's a very different focus from some nonprofits, which and especially environmentalism, where the timeline is just completely different. How do you deal with your impatience?
Or how did they deal with it?
Right on. Because I can see myself. I'm very involved with multiple projects, and I love pushing things forward. And I get very impatient. And I've worked for a nonprofit myself, and I clearly know that it's probably not for me while I'm before I'm 30, because I'd be too impatient about it. I'd really want to see this thing happen now.
Right. Well, something I said earlier, which is when you're making a grant to a nonprofit, you are making an investment in that nonprofit. You're just recognizing that you're not getting a financial return. Yeah. So if you're going to make an investment in a nonprofit, there's a whole decision process that you're going to say, why should it be this nonprofit versus that nonprofit? Within a nonprofit, which activity should I be supporting? I think for Betsy and I, the nonprofits, the large nonprofits that we work with, know what we're all about, and they come up to see us as their venture investors in some ways. And we're very proud of the funding that we have done with the largest nonprofits, but with small, innovative projects. And so we'll sit down with the CEO of Fred Krupp, as an example, of environmental defense, or Francis Beinecke of NRDC, and many others. And they'll say, hey, this is a project that we want to work on. Or Betsy and I will sit them and say, hey, this is something that we think you should be working on. And we'll talk about it. And if there is an opportunity for us to provide seed investment to that project, we'll do that. And we probably do 5 of those a year. And again, if we're successful, then our seed dollars will lead to other organizations, other foundations getting behind that. And we've done that, a stream of that. And I think we've got a good reputation so that when we do this, other foundations will say, all right, well, if Betsy and Jesse are in it, well, then we'll take a look at it as well. The impatience, the problems that they're trying to solve are really, really long problems, and I am impatient, and I think over the years I realized you're just not going to get the result. I thought climate change, I actually thought that there was going to be a bill passed, and like so many other folks in our sector, we really did, and we were almost there, and then it didn't happen. And actually on that note, we all kind of walked away after Copenhagen fell apart and said, now what do we do? For 8 years, this was our defining moment. It was going to happen. And everyone walked away and said, what do we do now? And I think all of us as philanthropists retrenched and said, what do we do? What we did was we kind of went local. We said, you know what, for a moment, let's just stay off of this global change or platform, because I don't think we really made a difference. But we can locally. And so you can really see when you're doing something locally, when you're touching one student or a community in your backyard, or even internationally, and you could see that it made a difference. It can happen. But what I would say is, as an entrepreneur and as investors in philanthropy, we're backing people. So within an organization, we tend to gravitate to the one who's the entrepreneurial one there, and they know it. The large organizations, will put out this person in front of us because they know that we can relate to them, and we'll typically find a project that we can support, and the result of that project will have. So global climate change is a big problem, and who knows how it's ever going to get resolved. But actually figuring out how to do renewable energy in New Haven or in Bridgeport, or doing urban gardens in New Haven and Bridgeport or elsewhere in the world, you can touch it, you can feel it, and you can see the result, and you could get behind a social entrepreneur and do whatever you can to make them successful.
Can I follow up, or
yes.
did you want to?
No, please.
I could, just because you mentioned how you having almost been there with the bill, and then sort of that disappointment.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to just 3 days ago I learned that I'm able to go to the sustainability conference in Rio, the Plus 20.
Great.
And I think there's I think a lot of people are looking to it, especially in light of also COP15.
Yeah.
What are your hopes for this conference? I think there's sort of the cynical view which says, well, the time of big conferences is sort of over.
Yeah.
And then there's sort of the hopeful view which says, well, we got a shot at it again, and after all, it's Rio, and it's been now 20 years, so who knows? What is your take on it?
Well, this is where I could actually give you a really political answer that probably I shouldn't. that there has to be a political will. What I found in Copenhagen in the whole process is that the rest of the world still looks to the United States to be a leader.
Oh, I agree. I fully agree.
Right. And so in Copenhagen, we were trying to do that at that point in time, and then we backed off. And so a lot of what was the progress that was made up to that point is going backwards, because it all needs to come together, and it wasn't. So the United States has to figure out again how to lead, and what does that mean, and what shape does that take, different than a large conference. So I'm not sure what will come out of that conference, but I do think, to tie it back to some of the questions on the investment side, if you can get different constituents paying attention to environmental issues in addition to the traditional environmentalists. In the world of philanthropy, I believe 3% of dollars go to environmental issues, right? Or 2 or 3%. It's a very, very small number.
I think we discussed this early on in class.
Right. So, and we probably know where all those dollars are coming from. We're a small group of funders. But if you look at poverty and world health and other issues, they're much bigger. These issues are the same issues. The issues of poverty and water, and when you look at climate change and the things that are happening and will be happening with droughts and floods, and we're seeing it with natural disasters, it really needs to be the intersection, and the environmental community, and they did in Copenhagen, and need to continue to have a much wider tent to realize that it's not about the environment. We live on this earth, and we all live on this earth, and we need to figure out how to coexist in the positive way. So I'm not sure exactly what's going to come out of that, but where I'm optimistic with your generation. I'm optimistic that there's so many younger folks who are figuring out how they want to do things in their own way. And whether they're starting a for-profit company that they want to make money. We talked to someone today that has a software platform for organic farms and for CSAs, so that's a for-profit business. Or social entrepreneurs, folks like 350.org that are running around trying to organize people, and I'm sure there's great groups here at Yale. So I'm optimistic that your generation understands the complexities of what's going on and will take a leadership role. And our generation will do everything we can to support your efforts. And our philanthropy, a lot of it is going to start up early stage nonprofits that have a different twist on how they want to do things, are collaborating with a larger nonprofit so they get to understand those pieces of it. That's where I think the future is. Certainly things need to happen at a global level, but I think it's going to be a lot of bubbling up, and eventually the leadership, our leadership in Washington, will look behind and realize that folks like you are pushing them forward into the right decisions.
It's exciting, right, to feel your enthusiasm. And Sunny's question, because 20 years ago, when I graduated law school, I was part of the Rio Summit then. And I spent, they don't know this, but I spent 3 years of my life, the most boring part of my life, believe it or not, even though I'm excited about the issues of the Earth Summit, on treaties that came out of the Earth Summit. So I worked on, the United Nations Biodiversity Convention and Climate Change Convention in Bonn. So the best part was traveling around the world and transboundary movement of hazardous waste and population in Egypt and, et cetera. But what you said is also true. I mean, I remember Ambassador Holbrooke, great guy, and it was the Clinton administration, but there was no will to make this happen on the international stage. And after 3 years of doing this, I didn't have the enthusiasm that you're showing 20 years later, and came back to the States to do something different and quite local. And how do you keep up that level of enthusiasm over this time? And I know that you're also doing very creative things right now in your investments, investing in interns and in fellowships.
Right.
How do you do that? How do you keep that passion and enthusiasm that I did lose? I mean, I'm still committed.
Right.
I just can't bear the day-to-day grind of it.
Right. You know what? I think part of it is being here today. You get recharged. I think we all have internal batteries, and you have to figure out how to get that battery recharged. My battery gets recharged by younger people or entrepreneurial people of any age. When someone has that energy and enthusiasm and you feel like you can help them, what they're trying to do, it recharges you. And so if you can give a little to somebody and you're getting a little back from that, and the whole system works. Your comment about interns and fellows is something Betsy and I have been funding through the foundation. Every year we have funded a handful of interns and fellows. And this year we've made a concentrated effort to really scale that up, and with a focus on climate change adaptation. In the past, organizations, nonprofits would come to us and say, would you fund an intern here and an intern there? And we did that, and never really even knew, in many cases, who the interns are, what their names were, and what they were doing. We're learning a lot from your generation of the connectivity, and we felt that this year we're going to create a program, and we are going to be funding over 30 interns and fellows in over 20 organizations. They're going to be working in those organizations, but they will loosely be part of a network. And what we hope is that our energy will be energized from those individuals, but what we really hope is that this network of students who are all passionate and all have an interest in climate change, adaptation, and resiliency are charged up by themselves. And often in the for-profit entrepreneurial world or in the nonprofit world, there are days that you're up and there are many days that you're down. And if you're surrounding yourself with other positive people, when you're down, someone will pull you back up. I think for Betsy and I, we're going to be married 30 years this summer, and that's a lot of the partnership and the relationship that we have, is when someone's excited and someone's less so, figuring out how to pull the other person up. So, but we have to be. Actually, we have no choice, you know. And so surrounding yourselves with inspiring people and finding a way that you can figure out how you can provide value to people around you, that's what the world's all about. But you had questions.
Oh, I have many questions.
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure where
Yeah.
to start. Wow, that's really exciting. It's really inspiring to hear you say that. And it's exciting to hear that you're funding 30 interns.
Yes.
That's incredible. I wish I would have known about that earlier.
We have room for more.
That's good to know. You know, I have several questions,
Sure.
but going back to funding locally and going back to, you know, kind of getting your hands dirty, and you were mentioning Bridgeport, Connecticut, which is nearby New Haven, and we're actually looking into an organization, Wholesome Wave, that
Yes.
one of our students is supporting. And you know, I've read a little bit on Wholesome Wave, but I was curious why you chose to help fund Wholesome Wave, and how that has worked out for you, and what you know, if that's been successful, or kind of what are your
Right.
thoughts?
Am I going to bias the decision process
no,
by
no,
doing
go
that?
ahead.
And let me give context. The students are fully empowered
Right.
by the end of this semester to give away $100,000.
Right.
So they have been designing their metrics. They've been analyzing various philanthropies and charities, local, national, international. And part of what they're grappling with are the questions that you could actually help them answer about why you chose
Right.
Wholesome Wave and so
Right.
forth. So feel free.
Okay. Let me ask you: is the $100,000? It's all going to one organization?
No, we can choose if we would like. I think looking at so we chose each student ranked all of the organizations last night, actually, so we're
Right.
right in the midst of it. And I think looking at the different summaries put up by each student, because each student is supporting an organization, there are certain sums that each organization is specifically asking for, which I thought was really great. You know, one organization's looking for $30,000 to start a specific program. And I think it's exciting looking at how these organizations are deciding to spend this money. They know exactly what they want. They know exactly what they want to get
Right.
done and what project they want to fund. And so I think we'll end up funding several organizations. And
Right.
Wholesome Wave is in this bunch, so we'll see.
Well, let me just say, I hope you do fund Wholesome Wave. They are a phenomenal organization.
By the way,
yeah.
if organizations get a match, it helps them.
Well, what do you say? We'll have a committee meeting.
It's true.
All right.
It's true, because the leveraging is
Okay,
a big part, and buys into your idea of who else is following this.
Well, we will match Wholesome Wave. We will match whatever you do for Wholesome Wave. So we'll do that. I've got the nod.
Thank you, Betsy. Thank you. And Joan.
You know, Wholesome Wave is an example of a lot of the questions you were asking me in the comments that I was trying to respond to about an organization. Michel Nashawn, who is the founder of Wholesome Wave, is an amazing guy, and he has been and still is a chef. Has been for his whole life. He has started many different restaurants, many different businesses, so he understands operations and he understands business. He's been involved in this healthy food movement for 25 years. He's the East Coast version of Alice Waters. Is a phenomenal guy and has made a personal career decision to get off of the path of restaurant stardom in some ways and focus all of his efforts. He still owns a restaurant and manages it, but all of his other efforts in Wholesome Wave. And we were seed funders of Wholesome Wave, so we probably were the first money that they got. And then Paul Newman, the Newman's Own Foundation, was right there as well. And since then, we have every chance we can. We are there funding Michel. We're doing it, in some cases we fund, just put money in to keep the lights on, because that needs to happen, and I don't want to leave the impression that all we do is looking for projects. We realize that organizations need capacity just to pay for the people and the talent they have. And we've done that with Michel, but he also is an example where every year we are talking about one or two new things we can do. The double value coupon program, which was what got them started, was a program that they were looking at down in Washington about double value, and actually, I don't remember where it was, in our conference room or up on the farm, when we were talking, and Betsy said to Michelle, all right, we'll double the double value. So at that point in time, just as what's happening here, is they had a great idea, but the economics didn't quite work, and so the incentive of doubling the double was really what made it take off. And as a result of that, other foundations, going back to geography, a foundation in San Diego and a foundation in Detroit and a foundation in Louisville said, okay, we'll double that, and we'll double that, and we'll double that. So our initial grant and the way we did it was a way to get other people going. And that's, that was Betsy's idea, sitting in the conference room. And Betsy joined the board, and so we know what's going on there. We were very involved with Michel. He was in our office yesterday talking about new ideas. They're a great organization, low overhead, truly committed people. The folks that they're hiring are coming from all different types of sectors, and they're really getting to the core of what the issues are. So I'm probably talking too much about them in particular, but they answer, if you look at a checklist of the type of organizations that we want to support that are in the newer type, they are at the top of the list. And
Jesse, could you help us understand something there? When you said low overhead,
right?
How do you determine what is low overhead for a startup? What is low overhead when you're getting to scale? Their budget has sort of tripled or quadrupled in a very short space of time, and their overhead has changed in its ratio dramatically over time.
Right.
Help us understand how you think of that, because we could take a different view as we look at that and wonder, is this really a good ratio, a good balance of overhead versus what you're actually doing?
Right. I would caution you, if you're having that conversation by looking at a spreadsheet and numbers and not talking to an organization, then you might get a static picture, and it may not truly show what's going on. And so in this case, keeping low overhead is us giving furniture to Michel so he can do that. Folks taking half the salary that they could get somewhere else, figuring out how they can have meetings in places where they don't have to pay for it. So they're a scrappy entrepreneurial new organization, but the talent that they're bringing in is high-level professional talent that makes us very confident that they're going to accomplish the things they have, and they have accomplished what they did.
I want to also address that, because this is cutting-edge stuff. Because one of the things that you are willing to do, I think, I hear you say it, is pay for talent.
Yes.
Oftentimes, people assume that if you're involved in philanthropy, you're taking a vow of poverty.
Right.
And it's hard to attract talent. You're trying to resolve the world's greatest problems on the cheap.
Right.
How is it, and this is what I think you also bring to this conversation, that if you want talent, you must be willing to pay for it. I mean, do you agree with that? Is that part of your philosophy?
Yeah, I think that there's a new paradigm that's happening, which is the potential employee is willing to work for slightly less than they would down in Wall Street, per se, because they want to work for an organization that they believe is doing something that's aligned with their mission. And I think organizations realize they need to pay a little bit more for that talent. And so I see that happening. I see it whether it's small companies or in the large environmental groups. They're bringing people in from people who've come up from nonprofits, but also people who've come from the private sector, because it's a different world. And this feeling of here's the nonprofit over here and here's the for-profit. I think people, in our generation, say, what, I want to do something. I want to do something that's good. And they're doing it. People in their 50s are leaving their first career and they're going to do that. You guys get a chance to do it the first time around.
So I am fascinated with what you've been saying, and I'm actually very inspired by your comments. And as you mentioned earlier about possible interns, I wanted to ask you, as a student and as students at a liberal arts school at Yale, and as an art history major myself, I haven't really had the ability or the opportunity to pursue my interests in food, except for extracurricular kinds of things. And what is your advice for us as young people? You said you appreciate enthusiasm. What is your advice for us in how we can pursue our interests in philanthropy and in pursuing this area of food justice that is just up and coming and it's really exciting?
Well, that's a great question. It's a great question. I mentioned earlier we have two children. Our son graduated last year from Stanford, and our daughter is a sophomore at Middlebury, and getting very similar liberal arts education and a great education there. And Betsy and I, as I mentioned, went to forestry school, which is a very technical school. So I didn't have the experience that you guys had, the educational experience. I think there's tremendous opportunity for you to get started, and what we have said to our children and what they've done is to try to grab whether it's an intern, an unpaid internship if it had to be, or a paid internship, or just a volunteering, even on a more ad hoc level, just to get started and to see what works, what doesn't work for you, what type of organization feels right. But I would say that the movement that you're mentioning, which is really part of a whole larger movement that I think your generation is fueling, which is saying, come on, we want to do something here. And so there are a lot of social entrepreneurs, and many are actually starting their own thing, in which case you have a whole another set of challenges, which is you got to go get funding, which is fun and exciting, but it's just like starting a business. It is a business. It's just a nonprofit business. And a lot of folks are going with smaller organizations that recently started, like a Wholesome Wave, or larger organizations like an NRDC that are large. They've been around for a long time, but I tell you, they're constantly innovating because they have to be. So if you know what your passion is, I guess I would say, and I've said this to my kids, if you ask them the words that we've said, passion, but if you follow that, it'll work. If you put yourself in play and you find an organization here in New Haven or your hometown, or if there's a part of the world that you want to live, you go there and you put yourself out there, and I imagine it'll happen. And maybe that sounds a little like fairy dust or something, but I believe that. As someone who's hired just a lot of people along the way, you could look at a resume and see the college that somebody went to, what their studies were. If you get a chance to actually sit with someone and they're jumping out of the chair, you could see it in your eyes. You could feel it coming from somebody. That's what it needs. Someone who's hiring. And actually, in our early days in Priceline, again, this was 1996, 1997. They're early days of internet. There were not people who were HTML programmers. There were not. Especially we were in Stamford, Connecticut. Everybody was out, in the West Coast. We were doing it kind of by ourselves, and we hired just people who were excited. They didn't know what they didn't know, and we hired them, and we created an environment. And Betsy was there, and we just created an environment that said we can make things happen. And people did, and little did they know, a year later they actually became an expert in HTML or database programming or whatever else. So I think that if you present yourself and your spirit comes out and your passion comes out, and you can find the organizations that are doing things that you want to do, that's great. The other thing I would say, which may sound like it's contrary to that, is at a young age, you're also collecting skills. So it's almost like a construction person who's got a tool chest, and you're going around and collecting skills, or maybe it's the different games that you can play now where you're collecting things, so however that is. But that's what you should be doing too, is if you can't find the perfect opportunity, the perfect organization, if you think to yourself, what skills do I need? In the next 5 years, what skills do I need? And go find an organization, and it may not be the perfect organization, but if it's a place that you can go and you can work a year or 2 years and give of yourself and make sure that they're getting their value from you, and you're learning something, and you're learning, and it could be learning sales and marketing, or it could be learning creative, or it could be learning speaking, public speaking, things like that. That's what, at your stage in life, you're on this journey, and you should be gaining great experiences and gaining great skills. And with every position that you take, you're just learning something more that's going to make you more valuable and enhance your value to the world for the next thing that you go on. So we know, and Betsy and I spend lately been spending like more time with our son's friends than our son, and gathering, and listening to them, you know, and they're all looking for the perfect job, and we're essentially saying, you know, you may not find the perfect job, but find a place that feels right, the culture feels right, that you're working with people that you trust, that you have respect for, that are honest and ethical, and then that you're given an opportunity to go prove yourself and give to that organization, whether it's for-profit or nonprofit, learn from that organization, and then your life will just be a collection of those career experiences. Is that helpful in some ways?
Great.
Earlier this afternoon, you said, why are you here? Why did we want you? And the reason we wanted you is exactly this. This conversation with a new generation of philanthropists. Mm-hmm. They are committed, they are engaged, and they're excited. And I think you bring a new set of thoughts and an enthusiasm that has been so inspiring. Yale has obviously been doing something incredibly innovative with this. We're teaching philanthropy and empowering the students to design their own metrics, to do their own research, follow their own passions. And it's so good to have you sharing that. So thank you so very much for coming in today. And even though we can't see her, but thank you, Betsy, and thank you, Joan, for being part of this wonderful moment in Yale's philanthropy.
Thank you. It's been a wonderful afternoon, so thank you very much.
And thank you, students, for joining us. This has been Philanthropy in Action. We all have a part to play in making the world a better place. As Jesse Fink said, it's passion, and take it with enthusiasm. Now, what are you going to do to change the world?